Hi guys, welcome or welcome back. Today I want to share with you the books that I read during the month of March. I read a lot of books, way more than I usually do, but to be fair I also read 3 comic books. I read 4 novels, 3 comic books, 2 children's books and 1 non-fiction book. So without further ado, let's get into the books. The first 3 books I will mention today are books that I read within the Irish readathon. So it was a month-long readathon which took place in March, and I just loosely participated. I just wanted to take it as an opportunity to read more books from Irish authors. So the first one that I read for that was The Heart's Invisible Furies by John Boyne, and I absolutely loved this book. So I gave it 5 stars. It's a book that will probably stay with me for a long time, and I would recommend it to anyone, and I will tell you why. So the story is centered around a man who is a young man at the beginning of the book. He's called Cyril Avery, and he has been adopted by his rich parents. So for example, his adoptive mom is a writer, and he is repeatedly told that he's not a real Avery. He is constantly, already as a young boy, thinking about who he actually is, and it also doesn't help that he discovers for himself that he is attracted to boys, and this all plays after the Second World War, so it's in very conservative Ireland in the 1940s, and needless to say, it's very hard for him. He is in love with his best friend that he met already as a young boy, and the whole book spans over many years actually, from the 1940s until I think 2015 or something, so it's a very long time span, and it's basically about Cyril coming to terms with who he is, but also at some point having to escape Ireland because the pressure is just too much and he doesn't get accepted for who he really is. He doesn't accept it himself in the beginning, and it's also a lot about obviously growing up, but also making mistakes, and boy does he make a lot of mistakes, but it was always in a very believable way and in a way that I was always rooting for him. I was always like, no, don't do that, but then okay, you can do it, you can get through this, you can get through this phase, you can get through this problem, you can get through this situation. And it's quite a long book, it's over 700 pages I think, and I read it so fast. I usually don't like big books, so over 500 is already quite a hurdle for me, but these flew by like crazy, and I just really enjoyed it. The characters were very fleshed out, the story was very entertaining and very engaging, so sometimes also very sad, but just amazing. And John Boyne's writing is really good, and I will slowly read everything he's written. So yeah, definitely recommend that one. It was a great start into the month. The second book that I then read, which was still within the Irish readathon, was Holding by Graham Norton. I listened to this on audiobook and I also really enjoyed it. So it's about this small fictional town called Dunedin in Ireland, and it's very much about village dynamics, all the gossip that's going on, people knowing stuff about people's past, and the story really kicks off with a body being found on a digging spot on a farm, and people are starting to speculate who it is. There is a farmer that used to live on that farm that mysteriously disappeared 20 or 30 years before, so people are starting to think it must be him, and they're trying to find who could have killed this person. Maybe he hasn't disappeared after all. But the story is narrated from different point of views. So to start with, from the sergeant of the village, Sergeant P.J. Collins. He is then also joined by a superintendent from the city of Cork to investigate on the murder. But the mystery itself kind of goes a bit into the background, and it's more about people's relationship to each other, all the secrets that are going on, and the problem of different villagers. That's why we have different point of views, I think 5 or 6 different point of views, and how they deal with this news, because a lot of people were actually somehow related or knew the person who they think is dead. There's also a really nice set of 3 sisters, and I love sisters dynamics, so that was also really nice. So I really enjoyed it. If you like small town secrets, mysteries, and more character driven plots, then definitely give it a go. It's really good. The next book and the last book that I read for the Irish Readathon, I was really hyped for, and unfortunately didn't really meet my expectations. I read Normal People by Sally Rooney, and I'm very conflicted about this book. I went in really wanting to like it, and I had really troubles getting into it, maybe because it starts with our 2 protagonists, Connell and Marianne, as they are still in high school, and maybe I couldn't connect to that so much. All the goings-ons there, the meanness, and I don't know, like typical high school stuff. I didn't connect to it so much, and I was really hoping that after they move on and go to university that I could, you know, be more into that mind space. And it kind of disoriented me that a lot of people are saying that Sally Rooney's voice is the ultimate voice of the millennials. And last time I checked, I am a millennial, you know, by definition. I was born in the beginning of the 1990s last time I checked. But maybe I'm not a millennial? I don't know. I just couldn't connect with the characters as much as I wanted. They frustrated me most of the time, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But for example, now if I make the parallel to Cyril Avery from The Heart's Invisible Furies, I was frustrated with him a lot of times, but it was not the same. I was still really connected to him. And these 2 people just kind of left me cold. What I did, on the other hand, like, is the portrayal of miscommunication. So I think this is also a very interesting point to make, also in terms of millennials being people who grew up very fast with technology and are very used to communicating at a very high rate. I found it interesting that then there's still problems of communications, and you know, there's things left unsaid and people are not talking openly to each other, and it was interesting to see it in the context of a romantic relationship between Connell and Marianne over the years. But overall, it still didn't really grab me as much as I wanted, and I have heard a lot of people say that it totally spoke to their hearts. So for me it was just okay, but keep in mind that a lot of people thought it was really amazing and outstanding, and they really connected with it a lot. So if this sounds like something that would appeal to you, definitely give it a shot, because I don't know, maybe it's just me, and maybe I'm just not a real millennial. So that was the 3 books that I read for the Irish Readathon. Now moving on to some other books that I read, and after that I just needed some comic books, so I went on and read 2 volumes of Buffy season 8, just to give you a broad idea of what it is. I don't know if you know Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It was a very successful TV show written by Joss Whedon. Really great. It's about this girl Buffy who finds out she is chosen to be slayer of all kinds of monsters, and she has to take the responsibility to save the world on a regular basis while still being in high school or university afterwards. I love this show, so great. When they stopped doing the show after the 7th season, Joss Whedon actually already had written story ideas for a next season, so they kind of incorporated that into a comic book format. So I wanted obviously to check that out at some point, and I got them from my library, so I read them in German. I really did enjoy them. So it plays right after the TV show ended, where basically, I don't want to spoil it too much, but something happened and there's not only one chosen slayer anymore, but these powers are distributed among female persons all around the world. And Buffy is suddenly not a lonely slayer anymore. She is in charge of kind of training hundreds of slayers. And so they go into this lonely Scottish castle, and lots of things go on from there, because obviously a lot of these people that suddenly got powers are not using them for good. I thought it was really entertaining, fast-paced, still the really nice gritty humor from Joss Whedon. I really liked it. And the next comic book that I read was Sherlock Frankenstein, and this is kind of sort of spin-off to another comic book series that I really like called Black Hammer. I probably will do an extra video on this series because I think it's not talked about enough on BookTube. But basically it's about these old school superheroes that are kind of not in trend anymore, and they're trapped in this kind of limbo world, and they don't know why, after some big battle against some big evil one, and they're trying to escape. This comic book is about the daughter of one of the superheroes who is trying to investigate what happened, and she's going to meet all the baddies basically and trying to find anyone who could be responsible for that. And one of the baddies is Sherlock Frankenstein, which is a crossover between a Victorian gentleman and Dr. Frankenstein, and I really enjoyed it. The artwork is really great. Yeah, just really liked it. So next, moving on to a novel, I read a historical fiction novel called The Miniaturist by Jessie Burton. I found this in my library and I had heard about it probably from some BookTube video. I don't remember which one. I don't normally read a lot of historical fiction, but I thought this sounded interesting, so I just picked it up and just read it. This book was a bit hard to get to. I had phases where I really wanted to continue reading it and some that just meh. So somehow I still read it completely. There are some elements that I really did like. The story plays in the 17th century Amsterdam, and it is really well described in this book. So you have a lot of the sights and the buildings and the food and the smells, and you also have a lot about boats and the colonies that the Dutch had at that time. There's also a lot about slavery going on. So some very interesting historical facts, but overall the characters were quite flat. The main character, Nella, is a young girl who gets married to this merchant who lives in Amsterdam. She barely knows him, and she comes to his household after the wedding, and she has to deal with a very secretive sister-in-law. The husband is very distant and barely talks to her, and he just gifts her this miniature house for her to kind of play with and put furniture in. So since she's bored, she just orders some from a miniaturist, and it kind of gets a bit uneasy when she starts getting pieces that she didn't order. And it's, for example, pieces of people, and it's the people that actually live in the household to such a detail that nobody would know except if they would actually live in the household. So there's kind of a creepy part to that I found nice, and I was hoping for more, but then it quite didn't reach my expectations, unfortunately. So plot-wise, I was just left disappointed. There were some interesting facts in there, especially linked to the historical points, which I thought were really well done. But apart from that, it was an okay book, but I wouldn't say I really recommend it, except you're really into historical fiction and you want to read something about the Amsterdam of the 17th century. Next, I read 2 children's books, or I don't know if you could call that middle grade. I'm not so sure how to categorize these things. And it's 2 installments from the series, A Series of Unfortunate Events by Lemony Snicket. I have this plan to read all these books by the end of the year. I used to read them when I was younger and I only got about halfway. So I just finished the 5th and the 6th installment in the series, which are called the Austere Academy and the Ersatz Elevator. And I enjoyed both of them quite well. This series is about 3 orphans, the Baudelaire orphans, who lose their parents in a tragic fire in their home. And there's this sinister character, Count Olaf, who is kind of always chasing them and trying to get his hands on their inheritance, which they cannot touch at the moment because they're too young. And while this plot is going on and they're moving from guardians to guardians, usually like each book one guardian, they also start to discover secrets about their parents and who they were associated with. I don't know too much about that, and I want to keep it that way because actually I only read until this 6th installment, the Ersatz Elevator, when I was younger, so I don't know how it's gonna end, so I'm really excited for that. It's really nice children's books. I really appreciated them as a kid, and they're still a lot of fun to read now. I kind of appreciate this idea that kids can do great things and they can survive great odds, and sometimes they have to deal with very stupid parents or adults that just don't understand them or just don't see the world as they do. And this is kind of a message that really was close to my heart when I was younger, and I still really like it these days. So it was very enjoyable reads, and I'm going to continue with this series in the months to come. Lastly, I will talk about the non-fiction book that I read, and it was From Here to Eternity by Doughty. I mentioned this in my book haul from this month. I really enjoyed this. This is a book where Caitlin is traveling different places in the world, and she is looking at different ways that people deal with their dead. So how they take care of them, how they dispose of their dead, and it kind of makes you think about how we do it in our Western civilization. And she argues a lot on how strange and distant our relationship with our dead are, or at least how distant it is compared to some other places in the world, and basically how this kind of makes our relationship with dead quite dysfunctional. In general, I just enjoyed learning about other ways people are dealing with death of loved ones all around the world. It was described in a very heartfelt way. She has this very sarcastic humor, and I quite enjoy it. It might not be for everyone, but still it was never disrespectful in any moment. So I really appreciated that, and it was written in a very entertaining way. It's very engaging. It's very accessible nonfiction, I think. And if you don't mind thinking about such things, about death and death of loved ones, then I would really recommend you checking it out because it's a really, really good nonfiction piece. Alright, so that was it. That was a quite rambly March wrap-up. I will see how things go and if I will keep this kind of format for my wrap-ups. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed hearing my thoughts on these books. Please do let me know if you plan on picking up any of these, what you thought of these, if you read any. If you like this video and you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and talk to me in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts. So until next time, bye!